Alright guys, I've tried back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Going into the Toronto Major 3, big questions being raised as to whether some of these teams underperform, if roster changes are necessary. That could be true for the home team themselves if they have a really hard time, but that is certainly potentially on the cards for the New York Subliners. Octane going on record to say that he thinks that Sib right now is a non-factor for the team, heavily implying changes could be needed after the Major if things go wrong. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. In a hotel this morning, because we are traveling today to Toronto. Absolutely sensational stuff. By the time you're watching this, I'm probably on a flight. I'm pretty sure that is how it's going to work. So yeah, buzzing for this one. And Clay and some of the other guys already there. They flew on the Monday. As Clay says, Toronto tonight, the place in the spring, it's got to be top 3 places. So awesome stuff. And going to give those guys a fair few days to prepare. Usually I think the teams fly Tuesday as well to give themselves the Wednesday. And then of course they start play on the Thursday. But and often Wednesday can be a media day and stuff. Although I don't know how many of those they're doing this season, because back at Boston, first event of the season, they did quite a few media things on the Wednesday, but yeah, I'm not sure that wasn't the case at Miami as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I'm aware at the very least. This was cool to note as well here from Slothay, who noticed, message of the day, we have seen this type of stuff in the past to be fair on COD, but it's still cool to see it again, that they are going to promote the tournament in the message of the day. It's a step that I'm sure helps to some degree. Does it, do everything it could in terms of the cross-pollination we had back in the Black Ops 2 days? Not necessarily, but it's nice to see regardless. We've got plenty to get into today on this event. I thought this is pretty cool. The fans rating the top 5 AR players in the CDL right now. Scrappy rated as number 1, which I think is definitely justified. Selim at number 2. I must say I'm surprised. I wouldn't maybe even say pleasantly surprised, but I'm surprised to see a fan vote putting Draza top 3 because, while I think this is definitely justifiable, Draza's been incredibly good for FaZe lately. The numbers back that up as well. Sure, is he as strong as Selim? No, but given where he was maybe expected to be, I think Draza has done a stellar job this year and, remains one of the biggest grinders in the game. We'll see that later today. Then it's Kenny and Dashi rounding out the top 5. So, for a fan vote, this is, well, it's kind of surprising to me, but is this unjustified given the current circumstances? I don't really think so. You can definitely make the case that this is true. And then you look at the Subliners, right? The other theoretical top 4, because I don't think you're putting Ghosty in here. As good as Ghosty has been, I don't think there's quite room for him in this discussion yet, at least in terms of if Thieves don't have a crazy good result this Major. But then Subliners, the other top 4 team theoretically on paper. Insight would probably have been in here back at Major 1, but of course that's not true anymore. And then for the Subliners, Sib is certainly not in this conversation. Sky's maybe not far away, but I definitely think that all these guys have outperformed him so far this season. And of course, going into the big Major, there were these comments from Karma the other day on what the plans are, right? Improving in the search and destroy, but just being consistent in executing their gameplay in the respawns. That is where they believe they're going to get the victories. And honestly, looking at the situation, it is quite plausible they run through once again to the winners finals, where they probably play FaZe. And this is one of the big questions on this tournament. What sort of upset are we going to see? Because I feel like we've got to be seeing something, right? This tournament, something interesting will happen. What that is, I don't know. Whether that's a first round upset, which is somewhat surprising, actually would be very surprising, unless it's Thieves versus Subliners. I think that can kind of go either way, but FaZe Heretics, Toronto Surge, OpTic Ravens, more than likely those will go in the favour of those respective teams. I think there could well be a losers run on the cards for a team like Ravens, or there's other options as well, but there is a run to top 4 that's on the cards in the bracket, certainly to top 6, but let's say Subliners were to beat the Los Angeles Thieves, and were then to lose to FaZe in the hypothetical bracket, they would drop down to the lower side of the losers bracket, where they might play a team like Ravens, or a team like Surge, or I think Minnesota are down there as well, as are the Los Angeles Grillers. I think that is losable if you're in New York, and that of course would raise serious questions. OpTic, I mean, we looked at these numbers yesterday, but they are 19-0 since January. They've beaten everyone they've played but FaZe. This actually is that run from the end of the Major 1 qualifiers through to what we have at the present day. I think there are questions though on what happens if OpTic lose in this way again. I know people have been kind of concerned because OpTic fans are sitting there thinking, well, we've beaten everyone but FaZe, we're going into this tournament, and once again the heavy prediction is that OpTic will beat everyone but FaZe. Surely that's going to change eventually. When that happens, I don't know. I don't know if it will this event. I have a feeling that if it will change, it could change at Major 4 in Burbank with no fans. And then who knows what happens going into the World Championships. Obviously, FaZe are the heavy favourites for this tournament, and you can see why on recent results. But even as I mentioned on yesterday's Dope Check, right, this 3-1 for FaZe, which is a very close series, a while ago now, at the start of the Major 1 qualifier, Major 3 qualifiers, was quite a long time ago. I mean, 5 weeks of qualifiers is a long split, right? In the previous years, we've had 3 weeks of qualifiers, so if something happens week 1, it's still relevant, and this is still relevant. But when it's like 5-6 weeks ago come the event, you've got to think the teams and their respective strengths are going to be rather different when it actually comes down to the real event. And obviously Scump was giving his call and saying that realistically, until OpTic beat FaZe, you can't really have this another way. So, lots of teams or lots of individuals coming up with a very similar bracket, understandably, obviously. But, I feel like something interesting will happen. I would be, I think, surprised if we get the top 4 teams being the top 4 again. I guess it is still the expected outcome, but just the idea that, it would be FaZe, OpTic, Subliners, Ultra again in the top 4 for the second tournament in a row. We had 3 out of 4 of those teams back at Major 1 with no Subliners, notably. Last Major, all of those 4 were there. This Major, maybe it happens again, or maybe it doesn't. I think 3 will be there. Whether 4 are there, that is another question entirely. And this is when Octane has been giving his thoughts on the situation. So the Flank Boys were talking about Toronto, and they were certainly talking about the New York Subliners, because the way they lost to Ultra the other day was not impressive, throwing away situations, and then all the drama happened before they got slammed again in back-to-back Karachi hardpoints. Not ideal at all. I don't know what the vibes are in that camp after that series. Couldn't have been especially high. So Octane says, yeah, look at Sib on this team, non-factor for the Subliners this year compared to how good Sib we believe that he is, and how good that he was on Surge for the last couple of years. We're not seeing that this year.
I said before this series that this was going to be a good test to see where these guys were at, because they really haven't played anyone other than FaZe. And I still have no fucking idea, because New York probably should have won the series, but they didn't. Toronto took advantage of it. Like I said, this could have easily been a 3-0, but yeah, I truthfully have no idea how good or bad either of these teams are with regard to FaZe or OpTic. I'm gonna be honest. This was a shit show of a series. It was great though. It's a great series.
I think OpTic and FaZe are your grand finalists at this next major. I just don't see it for Toronto or New York. Both of them have sort of glaring weaknesses. New York's respawn, well, their control's been good. Their hardpoint's been really poor. SNE's been up and down. In Toronto, respawn's been better. Sometimes you get some very inconsistent slaying from Jamie and Envoy, but their S&D is still a huge problem. Like with those 2 issues, I just don't see how either of those teams overcome OpTic or FaZe unless both those teams have like a terrible day individually.
Insight and Envoy played good though. Finally together, same day.
Yeah, they had their moments.
That's a deceiving stat, Pat, because they had some pretty horrible starts to some of these respawns.
Yeah, but they both got 80 kills.
Yeah, I mean, they picked it up in their moments, but there were, like, prior to the map 4 restart, they were both, like, double negative before, like, I think like Dill eventually went on a streak. Like, first map, they were getting kind of pooped on, and then they brought that back, obviously, with the 120-point comeback. So I think the consistency there is still something to worry about. And on the other side, Dante is just like actually a non-factor for these guys. Like I don't want to be like super critical of him, like harsh, but like, bro, I'm still waiting for like that Sib to come out, dude. Still, like, okay is not why you change your roster after winning champs.
And Caesar had a poor series. He usually is one of their
Caesar's
better
been their better player. He's been their most consistent player than Paco. Like, I'm still waiting for Vanguard Dante. I'm still waiting for the player that
Holy fuck, the amount of kills
up,
and deaths
bro.
that Kismet has is insane, bro. That
No,
guy is
bro,
He
he was on a
putting some
mission
damage down,
today.
though. He was putting his
That guy is
damage.
flying.
I will
He was
say,
on a
though,
mission today.
like Dante put a lot of damage down, but the team composition definitely changed a lot from making that team change in the beginning of the year. I mean, one thing you can't deny is New York. They had the slaying power, but sometimes in a map, like some of the decision making they're making, it's a little off.
Envoy getting dropped after this major. I'm not sure who Ultra can get that has any potential even near Envoy. But I don't understand, like, I don't know.
He's got the yips, man.
Yeah, but he's been playing well this major, but now they're playing a team that can slay.
It's still early.
This is still very early.
Still early.
What stands out to me is this looks like normal New York slang that we know and love. It looks like Hydra, Sib, Kid, everyone looks good right
They're
now.
all shooting
There's
right
no
now.
one starting off slow. There's no one 2-8.
Scrappy, of course, talking all sorts of trash when they beat New York the other day. I didn't even notice that Scrappy said they beat New York 3-0, which they didn't. They beat them 3-1. But I don't know, maybe they beat them 4-1 because they won that kind of game before maybe twice, at least in his book. And, well, maybe he just forgets about the fact that they lost that search and destroy. But maybe technically they didn't in Scrappy's mind. I don't know. Going to LAN, that is the key talking point. But these are the numbers from the Subliners so far this season, right? and they're worth looking at because, well, this is Major 3. Overall, it looks like this, which, is not too bad, but also worth noting that this Subliners team have had a big habit of winning maps in terms of slaying, but not actually winning the map, right? So the numbers in terms of KD probably don't tell the full picture here for this team. And if we now look at Major 3, it's a pretty ugly story, really, apart from Hydra and really Skies. I know Skies didn't have the greatest series the other day, but this is what you expect from Skies. Roughly a 1.1, if not slightly higher, with a relatively low Slayer rating because he's not an especially fast player, but, he delivers what he's expected to deliver. What you need is Kismet from an SMG side to be a very good partner to Hydra. That was the case last year. There are questions whether that's the case in a 150 HP COD game, whether that's the case, with no snaking, because, obviously Kiz and that Subliners team were pretty proficient at that, shall we say, on maps like Hotel last season. Is Kismet as good this year as last year? It doesn't look like it to me, but Sib is the big question because Sib's numbers are maybe not too dissimilar to what Priester was doing last year on the team, but obviously that was the whole point. Sib was meant to come in to pack-a-punch the roster, make these guys substantially better in certain ways, and bring more slaying to the table. Priester didn't deliver the craziest numbers, but he certainly was a good teammate and added serious value to that team outside and inside of the game. Sib comes in, doesn't really do anything any better, and doesn't have the attributes that Priester had. It's kind of clear maybe why the team has somewhat regressed, because Sib's Slayer rating, that's the one that I'm looking at, right? This is basically kills per 5 maps in a 5-map series. So Hydra averages 88 kills in a 5-map series, pretty mega. Sib averages 71, which is actually, it's lower than Skies, which is not what you would want, really, from your high-slaying theoretical flex player on the team. So is Octane right about Sib being a rather non-factor? Because when Sib was brought in, we know how good this guy was, for example, last season and even the season before that on the Seattle Surge. He was in the conversation with Prez. Even those guys had their debates, didn't they, right, on exactly who's better. Was Sib better? Was Pred better over the last couple of years? I think the answers to those questions are relatively straightforward, but honestly, who knows what they're going to say in that moment, and Sib was confident that he was better at some games, maybe Pred was better at others. We've not seen that translate this season. I can't imagine that as a result, the vibes are especially good. This is one of the reasons why the champs curse exists, where a team wins champs and then they struggle to get back to that point with the same roster usually, is because it's so difficult having won an event and then you start losing because other teams catch up and they make more progress, to actually feel like you're going to be able to get back to that level again when you've won a fair bit as they did last year, and now these things are happening. That takes a serious toll on the mental kind of stability of the roster and what their feelings are for the near term, and that is the concern that I would have if I'm Subliners on what I do after this major. There was even discussion here from Scump on, exactly, we saw this clip a little bit earlier, right, on Envoy getting dropped and just saying, he's got the yips or whatever. And who knows if that's true or not. And Envoy's still been kind of up and down. But I think we'll see this major. To me, Envoy and Insight have both been somewhat liabilities lately for Toronto, and that is a bit of a concern when you play teams that don't have liabilities really in FaZe and OpTic, certainly in the series that we've seen in recent times. They can, of course, deliver Ultra, but they're also potentially liable to someone dropping a 0.7 stinker with not much damage, and therefore having a hard time. The same thing feels true for the Subliners as well, with both Kismet and Sib on their own separate days, and even Skies didn't have the greatest series the other day, but, he's still been solid overall. So the question is, what sort of result would justify a change? Because now is, if you're going to make a change after this event, now is the time to do it, right? If you're New York and you come out of this event convinced you're not going to be able to win champs, either FaZe look too good, OpTic look too good, or you just look terrible, surely you've got to do something, because Subliners have shown no signs of winning an event this season. Top 3 last major, that was fair play, but they weren't really close to beating OpTic, and beating FaZe therefore still a massively different step. And the way this bracket works out for New York, they could lose to Thieves round 1. If they do, they'd play Boston, then either Legion or Heretics. So I mean, they should beat both of those guys. Then they would play though the loser of Ultra and OpTic to get top 4. So that's definitely losable if they lose to Thieves. If they beat Thieves and then lose to FaZe, they will play possibly the Ravens, and Carolina love that matchup for whatever reason. I think they've played a couple of times now. Certainly once they played at the start of the season on LAN, and the Ravens beat them back at Major 1. And would I be massively surprised if that happens again? No. So I think if Subliners get top 4, they probably stick with it. But if they get anything worse than top 4, they've got to consider a change, right? I guess the point is, what do you actually do? Because if you are going to get rid of Sib, who do you bring in instead? Doesn't really seem like Illy is an option. What other AR players are there out there? There are a few that you could consider, but you know, maybe it'll be a chemistry thing at that point, right? Like, I don't think it's clear that there's a player out there you can sign that upgrades from Sib that's actually available right now. But if the chemistry is chalked and the teamwork in, then something's got to give, right? These are the odds, by the way, pretty wild to me. Okay, maybe not a surprise, but we've got 3 teams basically in the mix here. FaZe, heavy favourites. Ultra and OpTic, second and third, tied seconds. Then New York, then Thieves, and then it kind of quickly goes down from there. So very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.